Hello, everyone. Smatho here for the round 2 edition of the DFS Down Under Show presented by Draftstars. Draftstars are Australia's #1 daily fantasy platform, offering Australia and New Zealand customers the chance to win big at AFL Daily Fantasy. Welcome to all of our live viewers on this stream tonight. It's great to be back for round 2. And as always, my colleague, the guru of AFL Fantasy, Big Hef, is back for another edition. How are you, mate?
Wow, that's a big intro, Smatho. I'm well, mate. How are you? I'm really excited for tonight's show. I thought we went reasonably well last week. If you don't mind me saying.
We did. Look, if you mind me saying, my balance last week didn't really reflect my played last week. I probably had one of the worst AFL DFS slates in recent memory, but no worry, that's back. That's back last week. This week's a new round, and always we got 2 cracking games that we're going to preview for Draftstars. Now, I'll see if you guys watching the live stream tonight, pop a question in the chat. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we're also on Periscope tonight. So if you got any comments, any questions, pop them in, and I'll see Hef or even myself, we can try and get to those questions throughout the show. Now, we are brought to you by Daily Fantasy Rankings, which is obviously our #1 source for free content, cheat sheets, previews, data tools. So if you're ever looking for any AFL-related content, get to dailyfantasyrankings.com.au, like these videos, etc. Free content is always good for the Australian DFS community. So let's get on to the show. And before we get stuck into the games for this Thursday and Friday, we like to a bit of a reflection on the week before. And there's a couple of things that we caught our eye this week. And first of all, I just wanted to bring up this particular comment. Are rucks relevant in daily fantasy? Now, last week,
I hope so. We spent a lot of time on them.
We do spend a lot of time, but I felt a bit flat. Like all the rucks that I sent to roster didn't go too well. I think the one I missed out was on the GWS ruckman. What's his name?
Flinny.
That's Flynn. In like Flynn. Didn't hit him, but the rest of the rucks like Gawn and Grundy and Hunter, I seem to miss the boat on. So that got me thinking, are the rucks actually still relevant in daily fantasy? What are your initial thoughts before I hit you with my hypothesis?
Oh, I'm scared. It feels like you set me up here, Smatho. First round, I do know there was some rule changes which could have affected things. I noticed the scores were a bit lower, but to be honest, it'll probably even itself out because the prices go up and down for all the players, as we know. So if the rucks aren't featuring as much as they used to for whatever reason, you've probably got a couple of weeks to take advantage of it, and then it probably catch up to it.
One thing I did cut my eye was that the amount of ruck contests in 2021 round 1 was the least amount of ruck contests since 2014. Like even the shortened quarters, if you add the 1.25% time, least amount of ruck contests. So if that continues for the next 3 or 4 weeks, we might be starting to think about your strategy in terms of paying for premium ruckmans in the future. So keep an eye on that as we go along the couple of rounds. Now, Hef, what did you actually see in a bit of a trend over the weekend as we reflect on round 1?
Bit of a trend. The main trend was how long the game seemed to go for. After last year, I was just like, oh, geez, there's still 8 minutes to go in this quarter. But then the North Melbourne Port game was like, North was staying with Port early, and then you realise how much time there is left to go, and Port just ran all over them. That doesn't really help us from a fantasy perspective. That was just an observation I made. One thing I reckon that's sorted out the men from the boys on the weekend, there was so much value around. It was obviously you had to nail the guys like Goulden and, well, Oleg Markov. He was pretty good value there in that game there against West Coast. But what really separated there was nailing the premiums. It's not you really got to nail those premiums that go big. Andrew McGrath was one that comes to mind. If you don't spend all your focus worrying about these value players who might go off or might not, you still need to nail how you spend your money at the top of your lineups.
We'll keep an eye out on round 2 because, there are a couple of primos missing from these couple of games this week, so we'll get stuck into these games shortly. So, Thursday night football, we have the Blues taking on the Magpies at the MCG, a 7:20 Australian Eastern Daylight Savings start. Currently, the Collingwood is actually the small favourites at $1.85. The line's around 1.5, 2.5 where you're looking. And the total is 163.5, which suggests that, the regular scoring has returned after last year's shortened season. The forecast is okay. We've had a bit of rain here in Victoria and also down in Tassie as well, but that should be clear before game time. The teams came out on Wednesday night here, and obviously a couple of changes, especially for Carlton. Jack Martin and Zach Williams gets his debut for the Blues, and for the Pies, Callum Brown and Steele Sidebottom are back for the Magpies. Jack Silvani, Lockie O'Brien, Oliver Henry and Trey Rusco come out of the teams for the contest. Now, huge from Draftstars last week. They've backed it up again with a $100,000 contest for AFL Blues vs Magpies there. Top 1,956 in the money. First prize is just under 10K, $9,770 there. So great amount of prize money for you there. As for the entries, it's $15 per entry, and you can have a maximum of 165 for this particular contest.
Interesting.
Very interesting. Other contests, including the high roller, the fiver, the mini, and the micro, is all there. Also, there were a couple of little tech issues last week, but Draftstars have assured me that they are good to go for maximum enjoyment for Thursday night footy. So, Hef, let's break this down. First of all, rucks.
Before we jump into the rucks, I just want to touch on a couple of points. First of all, when we're talking rain, MCG, we've got to remember how well this ground drains. So it doesn't matter how much rain we've had all week. If it doesn't rain on the night, then it's going to be really good conditions, I would assume. So don't be too fearful of all the rain we've had during the week. And just worth touching on those lineups. Jack Martin in for Silvani looks pretty like for like. Considering Martin's playing forward at Carlton. Zach Williams coming in for Lockie O'Brien. The team sheets don't usually give us a whole lot to work with, but be interesting. I expect Williams to play on ball rather than that defensive role we've seen him up there in playing for the Giants. An interesting still side bottom back into the side. I think they'll be using him to try and shore up the midfield after they got whopped there last week against the Bulldogs.
All right, okay. So good team analysis there, Hef. You've really stepped up in here round 2. I'm really liking this. Now, my first question to you, I was going to pose the question about the ruck position. So I've got a little graphic here to show you, which shows, here we go, Grundy versus Pitto. Now, Grundy last week scored 85 fantasy points against Mark Pitto, 66 against the Tigers. What I'm really liking here is that Grundy's beaten up the Blues in the past. His last 3 scores is an average of 121, which goes along with his season's average of 113. Whereas Pitney, I've only just noticed, he only played around 20-plus games in his whole career. So he is building on that average, but when he played Collingwood last year, he only scored a paltry 53. So what are your initial thoughts here? We are talking about Grundy and Pitney. There are some other options, but these are the 2 main ones that you want to be looking at.
Okay, we sort of look at last week's scores there. One thing I want to keep in mind is that we were particularly high on Pitternet coming up against Nankervis. So that was a great matchup for him. So the fact that he got 66, I'd probably temper my expectations a little bit because that was a great matchup for him. And on the flip side, we were talking about Brodie Grundy. We talked about Stephen Martin's impact on opposition ruckman in the past. So the fact that Grundy only had the 85, maybe we could sort of give that a little little boost. It's more of a neutral matchup here against Pitternet, and was Pitternet goes from Nankervis to Grundy, that's almost going from one end of the spectrum to the other. So I'm leaning to Grundy. I think it's a much better week for him here, much better matchup, and I think Pitternet might be quite popular with that 66 there, sitting against his 9,000 salary, but it's a totally different kettle of fish for him this week.
Now, we've also got options in Levi Casbold at 8,570, and then Mason Cox here at 7,340 with a 77 to his name from last week. And I've got here Clayton asking on here, Cox a lock for the ruck, surely. He will be highly owned.
Cox a lock. Ever heard that before, Smatho?
Cox a lock. There was a basketball player called Cox this morning in the NBA that didn't go, was not much of a lock. But anyway, Mason Cox. Look, this is interesting because, yes, 7.3 and 77. That's fantastic value.
Sort of like what I was saying last week, though, with Pitternet and Grundy, though. We did talk up Cox and his prospects on the show last week. He was down at 6,000, and we pointed out he had a couple of good games against the Bulldogs in the past, and his forward work was going to be probably better suited there against the Bulldogs than most teams. So, like I said there with Pitternet's, his 66 might be a little bit above what we could expect. I think Cox, this is a very different matchup coming up against Carlton. I don't think he's going to have as easy a time of it against the Bulldogs. And last year, I think he only scored 39 from memory. So, and once again, different matchup. He might be over-owned for mine, Mason Cox, with that 77 sitting against his salary.
Just quickly, would you play the double rack stack, like a Grundy/Cox setup? Or
I don't really like it for this one. No, I'm pretty happy with Grundy.
Very good. All right, let's move on to the back line. And also, we banged on about this last week, how the Collingwood Magpies give up a stack of points against defenders, and that came into fruition last week. So we had players like Caleb Daniel, Alex Keefe, Bailey Williams, all achieving really good scores, especially, Alex Keefe. He took nearly 100 points there. So against the defenders for the Pies. So this week we've got Sam Doherty, we've got Zach Williams, Adam Sarter, the three key ones here. Let's talk about the Carlton and defenders first, because they're going to be pretty popular. But is there anyone that you're particularly keen on for this matchup?
Well, I prefer to stay at the top of the market here for Carlton. Doherty has gone up in price. Sard, not so much. Now, Sard was really good last week with 99, and we talked about how these new men on the mark rules would probably suit Adam Sard. Given he's $2,000 cheaper than Doherty, Doherty's usually going to be owned higher. I'm really happy to lean with Sard again. And the other one we want to talk about is Zach Williams, who I don't expect he's going to play back. I think he's going to play more through the middle of the ground. And 12,000, I don't think he'll get much cheaper than that for the rest of the season. So, forced to pick, I would probably, Doherty's got such a great matchup too, but probably save a little bit of money, go through the Williams-Sard combo. But it's not a total fait accompli, just locking in the Blues. Look back at last year's game, Collingwood did possess a lot of the ball in the back half as well, the likes of Crisp, Noble, just the usual suspects, really, Maynard. So if you are looking to play a pie stack, it's not a sure thing that the Carlton backs are going to outscore them. But forced to pick, you got to go with the Carlton backs, I think.
Now, obviously, these two particular players will probably be pretty chalky. So is there any guys down here at the bottom that we might want to squeeze in to pop? Tom Williamson, Wittering, Roughhead, Liam Jones, all under $9,000 for some salary saving?
There's no one who really stands out to me, but there are a few guys who've got a ceiling that makes them worth playing. Darcy Moore is just an absolutely superb footballer, takes a lot of marks. He scored 85 last week. He's probably going to be floating around there on Harry Mackay, but he's a guy that can pop. And Liam Jones is a guy coming off a 31. He's only 7,000, but he's he's underrated for good reason in fantasy, but he does pop every now and then. So they would be my guys, just because they got a ceiling. If it comes off, it comes off. You want the guy who's going to pop off for 80 or 90 rather than just a solid 60. So that's where I'd look, but I'd prefer to spend up on the backs, to be honest.
Okay, well, let's lock in Williams and Sard in our little team that we're building here tonight. And move on to the mids. Now, obviously, the Pies were pretty poor last week, getting absolutely smashing the disposal rate. Bulldogs had an absolute brilliant time. Pretty much only Pendlebury was the only one who provided something of substance. But we expect a bit of a bounce back against, a really good Carlton midfield, in my opinion, obviously being a Blues fan. But in terms of fantasy, Collingwood can really rack it up. So are we going to, as you say, back the truck up here on the mid for the Pies?
Well, the Pies of old really rack it up. It's too early to say that they're not the Pies of old, talking midfields, but they just got dominated by the Bulldogs. But that said, how many teams are going to get dominated by that Bulldogs midfield this year? I suggest it's probably going to be a lot of them. Sidebottom coming back in is the interesting one. I think that he has been used in the middle when they've been short in the past. He might be a little bit underdone, but I think they will use him in the middle. I think Taylor Adams is going to be looking to bounce back. But you think of Carlton, you do think of a pretty strong inside group there, particularly with Cripps. And it'd be interesting to see what happens with Williams coming into that mix. So I'm going to throw a name at you here, Smatho, that I will be quite keen to play. I think he's going to be low owned, and that's Ed Curnow. You're a bit of a fan of Ed, being a Carlton boy.
Yes. So 99 last week. Didn't really seem to do too much, out of the ordinary.
He just goes under the radar, doesn't he? The key for Curnow that I liked was that he was still getting a lot of the centre bounce work. He attended 70%. They played a pretty solid four there in Cripps, Curnow and Walsh. It's pretty easy to find Walsh and find Cripps, and the field will always find them. But Curnow, 99, and looking back at last year, he was the top scorer for Carlton again there. So, we know we like to try and find some lower owned guys where we can. The price isn't really going to make anyone jump into Ed Curnow, but there's definitely a chance Ed Curnow could be the top scoring midfielder for the Blues again.
All right. I do like that, Hef. Now, Clayton here, as you can see here, Pendle seems a reasonably priced still. Dow still at value. No, I'll answer the Dow question. He is still at value. If you scroll right down the bottom here, mid-forward available at 6,760. So, again, he's going to be a quite popular play here. I'm going to lock him in anyway in the mids because I do like a couple of forwards coming up. But Paddy Dow at 6'7" is pretty much not essential, but with no Lockie O'Brien now and nothing really cheaper down here, like you rather play Paddy Dow over Tyler Brown. So Paddy Dow for me. What are you thinking of Pendles? Can we get Pendles in at 13,830?
Yeah, I think I agree with Clayton there. He's priced reasonably well. Paddy Dow was a guy I was looking at to possibly avoid here, given he's going to be so highly owned. But in terms of structure, I think there's not a lot of cheap guys that stand out. So you almost find yourself stuck playing Paddy Dow if you want to go with Grundy and you want to spend up in the back. So I wasn't taken by Paddy Dow's performance last week, Smatho. He's getting the opportunity, but we have talked about him being disappointing. And, well, I think the jury's still out there. But 6,700, I think he's going to be pretty chalky, and that's probably fair enough.
Fair enough. Now, I actually forgotten to lock in a ruck here, so we might as well lock someone in now, and we got to go have a Grundy, aren't we?
Can we afford Grundy? We're going to have to go cheap up forward here, aren't we?
Let's have a look. So we're looking all right. So let's have a look at the forwards. Again, there's another stone cold, I wouldn't say stone cold lock, but if we're talking about backing the truck up, taking away the bias, people that get burnt, the ownership gets down, then we're talking about Jordan De Goey. Again, he's pretty cheap again. Where is he? Did I scroll past him? Here we go. 10,510. 61 last week. He did attend some CBAs early in the game and then just kind of got lost. Obviously, a bit of pressure from Carlton mids pushed him back forward. But if there's ever a game for him to bounce back, it is against the Blues. What do you think?
I tend to agree. He's one of these guys that we're just going to be basically just tortured by for our whole life to go, isn't he? But he's just got the upside. I assume side bottom coming back might just take away from his midfield time a little bit, but he can score when he's forward to go. It's just a matter of whether he's on. We might have to put him in the midfield even to open up a bit more cash if we're going to run with De Goey as well, Smatho.
All right, let's do that. Let's get him in the mids. There he is. Let's go back to the forwards. That leaves us at an average of 7-4. So let's get some real cheapies. And
no, we're in all sorts of trouble here. Okay, we're going to have to go. A guy that in the same sort of mould is Jamie Elliott, actually, Smatho. When we talked about him last week, he didn't get the centre bounce work that we thought he might, only down there at 19%, which when we talk about backing the truck up, you still like to see the roll there when you're doing that. The smaller roll for Elliott, it really turns me off him a little bit there. A guy like Callum Brown is probably my favourite of those cheap guys. There's not a lot on offer here, Smatho.
No. All right, let's get Callum in for now. All right. Any other while I rejig this lineup, talk about the other forwards that are in this particular matchup that you could roster in, especially at the higher end up here, because there's a lot of obviously mid forwards here. Not many forward available guys only. Martin, Fogarty, McKay, Mychek is probably and Fisher.
And Fisher. So Fisher's one that did seem to get a bit of work up the ground there. He had 23% centre bounce attendances, and he has always been that guy who's threatened to be able to perform up on a wing or up on the ball. So at sub 10K, I think Fisher's definitely a guy that you can use to save a bit of salary through your teams. A guy like Jack Nunes, who gets priced up off his big 100, I'd be more inclined to steer away from him, especially with Williams coming back into the team as well. But Fisher and Fogarty showed a little bit too. There's some guys a little bit cheaper that you might want to look at. But this is going to be a pretty tough slate to fit in all the guys you want to play, it looks like.
Now, Chaz likes Fogarty here. Yes, I do like Fogarty, especially his only forward availability. Brown at 8K seems a reasonable option. So I've gone back here to Braden Sire. So if I was going to choose between Sire or... Oh, I've already got Calm already, so I'm not going to play both, I reckon, Clayton. So I've got one left here at 12,300. Mark Murphy, Jack, Martin, Jamie Elliott. Any of those?
Sire's another guy we can talk about who disappointed everyone when he was quite popular, but he did have the role. He attended more than half of the centre bounces. So when I was a bit down on Elliott, that was because he didn't have the role. Sire did have the role at least. So side bottom coming back can affect that possibly, but you do know how much I love trying to jump onto these guys when everyone else has spat it with them, Smatho.
Fair enough. All right. Yeah, I'm just going to click in Mark Murphy. So there it is. I know he's on the wing. He'd probably be only good for 70 or 80, but at 12,000, people might jump off him. But there is the Down Under show team for the
people
Blues.
Know we've got a bit longer to tinker than we do there, Smatho.
Oh, we do. we do. So let me go back into here. So make sure you get the Draftstars into that particular contest, 7:20 p.m. on Thursday night. And let's move on to the next game, which is on Friday night. Geelong Cats taking on the Brisbane Lions. Another 7:20 p.m. start down at Candidia Park in Geelong. So it's a home game. First game they've had there in a while, I do believe. The Cats are $1.60. The Lions are around 9.5, 10.5. And the total is 170.5. The forecast is also good for the Geelong area on Friday night. As we are streaming on Wednesday night, we don't have the teams for this particular matchup, but we do know a couple of things. And the first, obviously, major news that is Patrick Dangerfield is out suspended for 3 weeks for his bump in Adelaide. Sam Menegola is in doubt with a shoulder injury. And Mitch Duncan, he's a chance to play, but the news is he's not quite ready just yet. As for the Lions, there's not much news kicking around down at Brisbane at the moment. So we just have to watch out for teams on Thursday evening for Friday night's match. Now, for Draftstars, we're back with another $100,000 contest. All the options are there again. So let me bring up the lobby for Friday. Here we go. $100,000 on Friday nights. You'll find it here on Friday. Past here, the Cats versus Lions. Again, just under $10,000 for first place. Hef, what are your initial thoughts for this particular matchup? when we're looking at Geelong versus Brisbane, prelim last year, two teams that, for fantasy-wise, are a little bit more different than how they play this particular game.
Yeah, this is set up all of a sudden to be. It was always going to be interesting because it was the preliminary rematch, but you've got Geelong coming off a pantsing there in Adelaide. You've got Brisbane, who've just got whopped on their own deck against Sydney. Both shock results, really, and now they both come off the rebound against each other here. It's going to be hot, I reckon. There's no way these two teams are going to stand for two bad performances in a row. So this is going to be a ripper, I think.
Now, obviously, if you look at the tools on our Day Fantasy Rankings website, there is a couple of things you'll need to know before we start getting stuck in this particular match. Now, these two teams, especially Brisbane, don't give up fantasy points to the opposition. They tend to play this restrictive style where you can't get a cheap kick out the back. They won't let you possess the ball. Less marks, more tackles, etc. So don't think if you're going to be thinking you're going to score 900 points in this particular matchup. If we look at the backs position, so we start at the rucks, and we got pretty uninspiring ruckman here. Oscar McInerney at 12,500 and Reece Stanley at 12,140. In my opinion, they're probably $2,000 too much for their overall output / potential for their fantasy. I think looking at those scores last week, 76 and 65 is around about the mark. So at 12,000, it's just a little bit too much. But we do have Josh Jenkins as well at 6,830, who was really popular last week, but didn't really do much against his old side. So talk about these rucks. Is there anyone that you particularly love, or are you just going to be like me and just going, well, this is just click and move on here?
Yeah, sort of please yourself a bit, isn't it? I do take your point there on both those ruckmen being a little bit overpriced. If I had to pick between one of them, I'd lean to big Oscar rather than Stanley. I know Stanley can leak points probably a bit more than McInerney. We know that McInerney was part of that 1-2 punch with Steph Martin last year. It'd be interesting whether that was more Steph Martin driven or the combo than Oscar being some sort of stingy ruckman himself. But I think you can make a case to just, if you're having trouble fitting all your players in with your salary, just dumping this ruck position and hoping they both, like you say, get that around that 60 and you can save on a guy like Jenkins. I don't think any of those other guys are probably in the mix, are they?
No, they're not. And obviously, again, you do have the ability to play the double ruck stack, but I wouldn't recommend it at these salaries.
No, I'm not happy with any option here. So, if we come back, we might just have to torch it and throw in Josh Jenkins and hope he bobs up and gets 3 Joe the Gooses.
Fair enough.
Was that Joe the Geese?
Joe the Geese. All right, let's move on the backs. And now these two teams were 17th and 18th for fantasy scoring in this position in 2020. So if you think your backman's going to score a lot of points, you might want to reconsider this. Tough to see either of these two teams to get to ceilings, especially with the value plays. Popular pick Jordan Clark was okay last week. He got going probably too late. He was pretty white, didn't get too much in the first half against the Crows, but obviously the rest of the Cats didn't get much in that first half either. If it helps, Daniel Rich took all 7 kick-ins and played on last week. So he actually got 21 fantasy points from the kick-ins last week. So let me click on this defense tab. Let's have a look at the options here. Tom Stewart's the most expensive at 15,270. What are your stands out here in this particular situation?
That is expensive for Stewart. Look, I think Clark is a guy that we can go back to. Like you say, those numbers for opposition backs for both of these teams are terrible if you're looking to pick some backs. So straight away, I'm looking at Clark again. I think Clark his role was fine. Just didn't happen for him on the day, but I don't think there's any reason that people could be so high on Jordan Clark for one game and then want to drop him completely. So he'd be my favourite play again. Clark, I can't make a case for many of these. It's a good point you make there for Rich, because it does give him it gives him a leg up, boosts his floor a bit with those kick-ins, and he obviously knows what he's doing, playing on every time there.
All right. let me put Rich in for now. I'm actually going to go back and take Oscar out because, as I alluded at the start of the show, these kind of mid-tier rucks are not really doing the job for me. So, let's get the geese in, the goose as you call him, Josh Jenkins. I'm agreeing with Clayton here. I think I'm going to go cheap with Jenkins and spending in the mid. So let's go back to that particular strategy. So we've got Daniel Rich in to get our kick-ins. Hopefully Geelong score 20 behinds down at home, and Rich gets the 15 kick-ins and gets 45 points from that. So we talked about Clark. Is there anyone down below here that could get on chains out of the back half? But it's tough against this Lions team.
Look, to be honest, Clark is by far still the best option for mine. I'm not too perturbed by that score last week, and if anything, I'm probably a bit happier that it might reduce his ownership a bit.
Fair enough. All right. Clark is in. Couldn't convince him otherwise. All right, let's move on to the mids. Now, no danger means there's opportunity for someone else to step up or others to step up in the Cats midfield. And if Menegola doesn't get up from his shoulder injury, then we could have guys who probably are just on the outside coming into the guts. So let's have those Geelong options first. Outside of Cam Guthrie, anyone here takes your fancy straight away in this Cats midfield?
Well, we've got 7 Dangerfield. There was a bit of talk about him playing up forward last week, but he still attended 74% of those centre bounces. So there is a stack of opportunity opened up. And the question is, do the Cats bring in a guy that's going to eat them up like Charlie Constable, or they might look at Sparkle Narkle, who they used right in the guts at times last year as well. If they do that, then those guys are right in play there at that sort of $8,000 and $7,000 marks. But then they might look to use Parfitt in a more of an inside role. He had 29% of attendances, but we know that they've used him heavier than that before. He was quite good there with the 101. And another guy that didn't set the world on fire by any stretch of the imagination was Sean Higgins, but having 39% of the attendances, that's got the potential to go up considerably as well. We know he was used very strongly in the centre bounces there at North Melbourne, and especially if Duncan doesn't get back in the team, they might just say, all right, we need to use Higgins' class in the middle of the ground here. So they're the guys that I think are going to get the boost from Dangerfield not being there. And Joel Selwood is a guy that looks like he's pretty much settled back in his rightful position there in the centre bounces, and he's reasonably priced actually, and had a couple of good games last year against Brisbane in what's usually a pretty tough, almost finals-like contest. That's the type of game that suits Selwood.
All right. I like Selwood too at 12,070. I'm pretty keen on what you said about Constable. Look, obviously he was the medical sub last week, and he actually looked really good. Provided him a really good run in their comeback stages after Menegola went off. So at 7,670, he's probably our cheapie that we need in for this one. So I'm going to lock him in as well. They're probably the two from the Cats that I'm keen on playing. As for the premium options, I do take your point about Higgins. He's going to get a lot of opportunity, but at 14,000, I think it's just a little bit too much. And then Cameron Guthrie at 15,130. I probably want to take the ceiling scores from Lachie Neale and Dane Zorko over Cam Guthrie in this one.
I am actually going. Well, we got a little graphic you want to show us for Neale and Guthrie, Smatho.
Yes.
I want to come in hard on this because I think this is an absolute brilliant spot to play Lachie Neale. He's coming off a below par game against Sydney with just the 68. If you cast your mind back last year, Sydney put a lot of attention in Lachie Neale in a game late in the year, and he had probably his worst game for the season against them there as well. So this is what we're talking about discussing the rucks in the first game. Coming off a really bad matchup, Neale, and then look at the 2 games he played last year against Geelong, who we do know are gettable for the opposition's best midfielders. Geelong generally don't tag. Cam Guthrie's too good to tag now, isn't he, Smatho? But
Yes.
Given that, the best midfielders can get their points against Geelong. So Lachie Neale top scored in both games against them last year. He's coming off a down sort of match, so his motivation is going to be high. 15,000 is a pretty good price for Lachie Neale. I am super high on him this week.
Excellent. He's in there too. 15,820. Yeah, I do love him over Guthrie. Even if there's a lot of cat mitts out, look, he was a poor start last week, but he has that massive ceiling. And if you don't have him in your team, he pops, then you can kiss your injuries goodbye. Look, I'll just leave this last midfield spot for now. We might want to talk about cheaper options in a minute, but let's move on to the Clayton also said that Parfitt is a really nice choice at 12K. I actually like him in the forward line, so I'm going to click on the forward line here.
Ooh.
It's my first selection here in the forward, so that only just leaves one more option in our forward line. Anything in there particular here for the forwards?
Well, we do have a lot of mid forwards here, don't we? In terms of Parfitt, Isaac Smith, who was superb over there in Adelaide in his first match in Geelong colours. Zorko is always the guy that can junk up at the end of games. He did that against Sydney. But they're all very expensive options. One guy who I was particularly interested in actually was Tom Hawkins, going back through recent history. He's coming off a really poor game against Adelaide. I noticed last year, though, in shortened quarters against the Lions, he had an 88 and a 99, which is pretty big numbers in those shortened games. But 13,000 just really tempered my enthusiasm a bit. But I think that's going to cause his ownership to be way down. And on that basis, I'd definitely be throwing Hawkins in a few lineups. I wouldn't be getting overboard because there is the chance he could just sink it completely. But he's a definite point of difference for me in the forward line.
Anyone who cheap down here from I noticed the guy has a new role here. Tom Atkins, 7,760. Now, he played a role across half-back last week, and obviously in the preseason as well. Was pretty popular. Came through with just the 50 points only. Tough matchup against this Lions defense. Could we give him another chance here?
Look, I think you can. The thing about Atkins is we know he's a really good tackler. He did get 19 possessions last week, and he conceded 5 free kicks. So all of a sudden, you're looking at 15 points coming off that 51, which for me, I think that just clouds what was actually a pretty good game from Atkins. And yeah, I'm with you there. I think he's one of the better. Well, I'd go as far to say he's the best value option there up forward. If he can get, at that price, even if he doesn't give away five free kicks, the score of 66 is really good at that price. And he only had the one mark. He's just going to be around the ball a lot. He's a really good tackler. I'm with you there on Atkins there, Smatho. Nice find.
It is a nice find. So that leaves me 15,600. So I could go back to the rucks and just plug in another 12K in there. But
you can get your old mate Cam Guthrie in.
Let's get the Guff Pig. Let's see, 15,130. I really like that team now. Parfitt, Atkins, Selwyn's, Constable, Neil, Guthrie, Rich. Yep.
And there's a lot of Geelong for a game at Geelong, which is always a good thing.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Now, Hef, any final thoughts?
You can. Don't hit submit. I like that.
Screenshot it now. That is going in. All right, Hef. So is there any other final thoughts on these particular two slates? We've been through a fair few players this evening. Any of your final thoughts before we wrap up the show?
No, that's I think we've gone through them pretty well there, Smatho. I've got nothing more to add.
Oh, excellent.
Except to say best of luck. Best of luck beating that second team. Gee whiz.
All right, well, let's wrap up the stream there. Thank you, the viewers, for watching the live stream tonight. Thank you to Clayton and all of our participants for sending your questions in. Make sure you get to draftstars.com.au to enter your teams for this week's Thursday night $100,000 pool and the Friday $100,000 pool as well. You can find us here at dailyfantasyrankings.com.au for all your free tools and cheat sheets and the previews for the AFL games. Hef, thank you so much for joining me tonight on the show.
Thank you, Smatho. Anytime.
And we'll look forward to seeing you, everyone, for round 3, which will be on the next show on Wednesday night next week. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the show. Cheers.